Okay, so last week we finished the section on the three different parts of Hachna'ah, and today we're starting Havdalah, separation. But I just want to review one of the last ideas we did in Hachna'ah. I saw some fresh notes from Effie. So the last part of Hachna'ah, if you recall, was Hamtaka Shel Hachna'ah, the sweetening of Hachna'ah, which was in two words, heartfelt prayer. So it's this turning to Hashem. And when we turn to Hashem in tshuva, when we want to do tshuva, that's the prayer that's immediately answered. For me, that was a very interesting point. I don't think I'd really grasped that before. That when we do tshuva, since Hashem is infinite in his forgiving, we do tshuva and he forgives us. I think it's a very important point. It's immediate. So when is a prayer immediately answered, if that's the quiz question? When we do tshuva. Okay, but then also, we also like to daven for circumstances to change sometimes. We'd like to have a different hashgacha pratis in some details. So here's something interesting that Effie said about that. If my prayers aren't immediately answered about changing the circumstance, you might have noticed that happens sometimes. Therefore, I still need these circumstances to lower my ego. So that in itself takes a lot of meditation and acceptance, that the circumstances that might be challenging for me are Hashem helping me in lowering my ego. We're going to speak more about this lowering of the ego inside, but again, I want to remind everyone that lowering the ego, making the ego lower, like so we don't feel better than other people, that space is filled with Hashem's Rahmanas. So it's like we lower the ego to make more room for Hashem's Rahmanas. And so we lower so we shouldn't confuse that, Chas v'shalom. I don't think any Torah HaNefesh student would want to make that mistake of confusing lowering the ego with low self-esteem. Because low self-esteem it's still about me. It's still about me, and I'm still in the center. And what I hate about myself can take up my whole consciousness. It's still self-centered. So low self-esteem is not shiftless. It's not hachna'ah. It's not lowering the ego. So I still need these circumstances to lower my ego. I'm happy that Hashem does hashgacha pratis to help me. So you can see there's definitely there's a certain element of enlightenment there. There's a certainty to remember it, if we can remember it, that I still need these circumstances to lower my ego. I'm happy Hashem does hashgacha pratis to help me. And this davening is this heartfelt davening is a spontaneous reaction to this realization that Hashem sends us these circumstances to help us lower our ego. In light of my realizing my fault, my responsibility, that Hashem is not the problem, Hashem is the solution. Another enlightened thought, Hashem is not the problem, Hashem is the solution. Something also that takes, many of these ideas, in a sense, seem counterintuitive to us because we're not used to thinking in such enlightened terms. So Hashem is not the problem, Hashem is the solution. I turn to Hashem in spontaneous prayer, and this is a direct quote from my teacher, Effie Ehrenberg. Here is his spontaneous prayer. Since I'm an idiot, please take care of everything. I thought that was very humble. Since I'm an idiot, please take care of everything. Now that prayer could work in many different, it fits for everything. I said, yes, okay. Please say so. And this state of mind is the sweetened hachna'ah. This is what we did last time. This is the sweetening of the hachna'ah. That to be able to say, since I'm an idiot, please take care of everything. To turn to Hashem. That we turn to Hashem. We know that our tshuva is immediately hashgacha pratis, and if they're not changing, we could still do some more. It's to help us. Okay, that's the review of last time. Now it's very exciting, fresh material, the chapter on Havdalah, separation. Okay, So it's chapter 5, page 43, for those who like to look in the book. And it's subtitled Ignoring Anxiety. I don't know if I would use the word ignoring, but it's definitely, it's stepping outside of our problems. It's looking at them objectively, as we're going to see. So this objectivity here is the key word that goes along with Havdalah, separation, separating from our problems. But no one mentioned that to me when I was growing up, that there was even such a concept of separating from one's problems. It's just, who knew? Simultaneously, it's a Jewish life, laughing and crying simultaneously, right? Just like Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, did. We spoke about that when his father told him the secrets of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, that he cried because he really knew what it meant, that it was destroyed, and he was in simcha because his father was sharing with him the deepest teachings of Torah. So laughing and crying at the same time has been a long time, 2,000-year-old, at least, part of Jewish life. Okay, so once we have reduced the immensity of our anxieties, problems, or dark thoughts, so we spoke about how we do that is by making the ego smaller. That plagues us. By making them smaller, by subduing our ego, we can proceed to the next phase of therapy, which he calls actively ignoring them, but I think detaching from them makes it clearer. So we're going to develop it. We're going to develop this idea, and each person can decide exactly what separation means to them. This intermediate phase of therapy is an essential prerequisite for the final phase, articulating the problem. That's the sweetening, for which we heal the unhealthy situation or frame of mind altogether. So I like that idea, healing the unhealthy frame of mind. That is a good activity, and it's good to help our friends do that also. That's a good friend, someone who helps us heal our unhealthy frames of mind. This is because in order to relate to something objectively and analyze it truthfully, we must first be released from our subjective ties to it. So we're talking about letting go of our subjective ties to our problems or anxieties and healing them through being able to be more objective about them. So this is the direction we're going. So ignoring anxiety, stepping outside of anxiety, is predicated on the assumption that the essence, so here's an assumption, here's an axiom here, that the essence of the divine soul is unaffected by the weaknesses of the animal soul. So I'm just going to read this paragraph and then I'm going to talk about it. It's very short. And it is therefore possible to rectify our problems by bringing our divine side to the fore, enabling it to assume full reign over our personality. Okay, so let's talk about what this is saying. This is saying that the Alter Rebbe shows that chapter 2 of Tanya introduces us to the Nefesh Elokis. Who knew? It's one of the things they also did mention when I was growing up, that we have a divine soul that's part of Hashem's essence, that Hashem, I guess, has made himself very vulnerable and gave us a piece of his holy essence, our divine soul. And that's part of our personality. It could be that it's subconscious. It could be subconscious, God forbid, for much of someone's life, or we could help make it conscious. It's super conscious, but whatever, whether we call it subconscious or super conscious, we want to make it conscious. Not only do we want to make it conscious, we want to have the ability to identify with it as our identity when we need to, which is quite frequently. Okay, and here's some wonderful ideas. The divine soul is unaffected by the weaknesses of the animal soul. So we have to understand there's a part of us that's unsullied. You know, someone who grows up without any knowledge of this could just think that somehow they're becoming blacker and blacker with the additional transgressions of each year. But no, there's a part of us that regardless of what we did, what was done to us, is a part that remains unsullied. I think that's a very healing idea by itself. And it says we want to bring it to the fore. In other words, we want to ask it, what do you think I should do now? And we want it to, and then ultimately enable it to assume full reign over our personality. So let's talk about that. Okay, one of the things I learned in Torah Sanefesh is from Effie, is that personality, like if you think of our personalities as a lovely circle or as a big glob, however you wish, it has edges. One edge is the lower end of our animal soul, the lower taivas of our animal soul. It plays a part in our personality, we have to admit. So that's one edge of our personality. And the other part of our personality, the other edge is like, the divine soul, the part of Hashem's essence. And our personality is kind of stretched here between, and we want the divine soul to play more of a part in our personality. Just knowing about it is a big relief. And then, we could give it a little time. Look, we're davening. Here's your chance, divine soul. I'm not lying on the couch like my animal soul wants me to do. No. I'm standing up. That's what I'm doing it for you. We have to want that. We want to like feed into our identity as a divine soul. This is for mental health. It's very spiritual also, but you can see it's a direction of mental health that fits into what Rabbi Ginzburg is teaching in this book, which is called Transforming Darkness into Light. Okay, so. And then it speaks about conventional psychology, doesn't really talk about the divine soul. So they don't really get this part. Okay, next page, 44. Identifying with our divine soul gives us an abstract vantage point in our mind from which we can relate impartially to the world and to our own problems and anxieties. So we're stepping out. Our problems and anxieties go along with our animal soul, and we're trying to look at them more objectively. When we feel detached from the world or from our own problems in this way, we can view it objectively and see what needs to be rectified and begin to see how to rectify it. Because this is saying, if we want to see what needs to be rectified in our animal soul, in our ego, remember the first first year Torah Sanefesh, the class is called Rectifying the Ego. If we want to see okay, I admit it. I have some ego that has to be rectified. It's hard to admit, but okay, so I have some ego that I need to rectify. How can I even begin to know what? I have to be able to step out of it. I have to be able to step out of it in order to look at it objectively. Because if I think it's me, it's much harder to give up anything or change anything. But if I think of it as, I have to train my little soul. It's so cute. I'm going to train it. We have to be able to step outside of it in order to do it. Okay. Without this detachment, we're trapped. Now, our ability to rectify the world and transform it into a home for Hashem depends on our ability to feel that we ourselves are not subject to the inherent constrictions of the world. And detachment is a prerequisite to influence. Okay, so there's two ideas here that I think are important. Remember, we spoke about one of Hashem, when it says in Chassidus why Hashem created the world, it said he had a taiva, he had a desire for a dira b'tachtonim. He had a desire for a home in the lowest world, which is our world. He wants us to make our home into a dwelling place for him where he can feel comfortable. He wants a dira b'tachtonim, our home wherever we find ourselves in the world, to make it into a dwelling place for Hashem. So that's a transformation. We're turning it from something secular into something holy. It's a transformation. We want to do that for ourselves. We want to do that for the world. And then it says detachment is a prerequisite to influence. And I think that works in two ways. In order for ourselves, we need to be able to step out and look at ourselves, laugh at ourselves, love ourselves, but at least step out of our animal soul, and no matter how cute it might be, and look at it objectively. So this detachment is a prerequisite to influence, and I think it's in terms of other people also. We have to, of course we want our second cousin twice removed to light Shabbos candles. It will add tremendous meaning to our life, but there's a point we have to detach, like we can't, or we won't, it'll be too overly enthusiastic. We could create resistance, but if we're able to detach, and you can see, we can have more of an influence. We have the ability, this is the Havdalah, the ability to detach and look at a situation objectively, and especially to look at our animal soul and ego objectively. Okay, thus, before we proceed to the stage of sweetening, which we're all looking forward to, where we transform Hashem's concealment in this world into the divine revelation it was meant to be, we must first pass through the stage of separation of Havdalah. In other words, so sweetening is to reveal Hashem in this world. Of course, it becomes much more sweetened anytime we're blessed to feel a revelation of Hashem in our world, in our life. It's a sweetening, it's beautiful. Life is filled with meaning. So this is part of our shlichus. And for me, I find, one of the ways, to step out of the ego, for me that works, is that just to say it's not about me, it's about my shlichus. Automatically, it changes it's not about me, it's about my shlichus. It changes everything. It's a stepping out of identifying with me and my problems and anxieties and obsessive thoughts and whatever else. So stepping outside of it, this is separation. Okay, so just like Hachna'ah, submission, lowering the ego, had 3 stages, also here we have 3 stages in separation. So we did stages 1, 2, 3 in Hachna'ah. Now we're going to do stages 4, 5, and 6 in Havdalah, and then eventually Amir Hashem will be up to the 3 stages in sweetening. But here we are at the very first stage, submission within separation, Hachna'ah within Havdalah, and it's called dismissing negative thoughts. Now, there's 2 chapters in Tanya on this subject of dismissing negative thoughts. Some of us have learned them together. Chapters 27 and 28 are all about. 27 is the Alter Rebbe's 3rd bad mood, that look at this thought I'm thinking. I've been for 46 years working on myself, and this thought arose in my mind, and I'm shocked. And the Alter Rebbe says, don't be shocked. Oh, if I to be a Beinoni and not a Russia even for a moment. Now that shouldn't be too hard. 1 moment, we can do it. So, and he says, not only shouldn't you be shocked in a bad mood, you should be happy that you have this thought, because then we can do one of the 6 constant mitzvahs for men and women that we say in the 3rd paragraph of the Shema, Lo sasaru. So we shouldn't follow after our minds and hearts to prostitute ourselves after them. We shouldn't prostitute ourselves after our thoughts. Look, just now I had a thought and I dismissed it. Yay, we should have the simcha of a mitzvah, and we can do it. And the Alter Rebbe empowered us to do it, and he believed we can do it. And we're going to get up to when it's tough. Okay, so here we are on page 44, the bottom. In everyday life, we constantly and naturally ignore anxiety or potential sources of anxiety by spontaneously dismissing most of the thoughts that surface from the subconscious. In other words, what it's saying is that we already have experience in doing this. We even do it without even thinking much about it. And when we walk into a car, we don't start thinking, how many people have survived their 20-minute car ride? What are the odds? What are the odds of we just dismiss it. We put aside the anxiety, get into the car, or whatever the case may be. We have experience putting aside and spontaneously dismissing it. This is a healthy form of suppression that simply prevents every little negative urge or complex that comes to mind from derailing the normal functions of living. Often enough, these murmurings are not very deeply rooted in the subconscious, and therefore do not warrant much attention. So in these cases, ignoring the problem is indeed the best way to deal with it. As we have noted, unwarranted attention to a problem will only aggravate it and artificially exaggerate it. So I think this paragraph, the main point of this paragraph is that we have experience doing this. This is not new material. We've all dismissed anxious thoughts in order that we can function in life, right? Like we've made Pesach. We haven't given into the thoughts of this is absolutely impossible activity. There's no way to do it. No, but we've forged ahead. Okay, now we're getting to more full-blown anxieties on page 45. Require conscious dismissal, a deliberate choice to ignore what presents itself as a burning issue. In this spirit, the sages teach us that the best way to fight anger is to remain silent, and the best way to deal with jealousy is to ignore it. Okay, so let's look at that slowly. The best way to fight anger is to remain silent. Okay, that appears many places. And the best way to deal with jealousy is to ignore it. Very helpful information that we might not know. In other words, feeling jealous, this is something you could choose to ignore. It's good to know. Now, if you notice, there's footnote 2 there. I looked up footnote 2, it said Reishis Chachma. Well, he's often quoted in Chassidus. I was curious about finding more out about the Reishis Chachma. I Googled the Reishis Chachma, and he is Eliyahu Davidus. He lived in Sfat in the 1500s. He was a student of the Ramak and the Ari, two of our favorite guys. And his ethical work, Reishis Chachma, is based on the Zohar. So he was a Makubal who wrote an ethical work. And this is Eliyahu Davidus. And even more exciting, he's buried in Hebron. He left Sfat, went down to Hebron. I guess he wanted to be buried with the sleepers of Hebron. He's in the old cemetery there. So there's a little information about the Reishis Chachma, who said, to repeat it, the best way to fight anger is to remain silent. We must all practice. And it's our anger, other people's anger. Try remaining silent. And the best way to deal with jealousy is to ignore it. So there's something to practice and something to see that it works. Okay. So here we go. Along with ignoring our problems, and especially if our dark thoughts do not leave us alone and we are unable to simply ignore them, like, and we're obsessed. Sometimes you ever find, oh, look, I'm obsessed. I'm thinking about this every 3 sentences, even though I'm pushing it out of my mind. I can label that. What do we do when we're obsessed? Okay? It says we should turn heavenward and implore Hashem for help. The fact we are still beset by anxieties indicate that it wasn't enough, at least in this case that we're talking about, to ask Hashem to bring us close to Him. The thrust of our prayers and the sweetening within Hachna'ah. In other words, the last thing we learned about is davening to Hashem. Once we said that the Maharal said Tshuva is davening to Hashem. I want to do Tshuva. I want to get close to you. It's turning to Hashem. Let's say our obsession is stronger. It's like coming back and interrupting that. So we beseech Hashem to save us from the dark thoughts that engulf us. In other words, turn to Hashem with our obsession. He's going to speak more about that. But this is an idea. It's a lot of thoughts we can dismiss. There are thoughts that we find, even though the thoughts can be ridiculous. And if we speak to a friend about it, they might just melt away. It's an obsession that's possible to melt away. It's hard to believe while we're in it, but to beseech Hashem to save us. Okay, this continues. This is very important. If our prayer is sincere and earnest enough, Hashem will come to the rescue. The soul is the divine dimension of the human being. As the Torah says, God's people are a part of Him. So this is a famous quote from Devorim. Then again, that Hashem gave us a piece of His essence. It's like, it might seem counterintuitive. If something seems counterintuitive, it means we need to spend more time meditating on it. How much do we believe that we have that every Jew, that we and all of the Jewish people have a piece of Hashem's essence? That's the divine soul. So we need to meditate on it. So by beseeching Hashem to rescue our soul, we are in effect calling upon Him to assist His own representative, a spark of His own essence. We're asking Hashem, please come and save the spark of your own essence in its struggle to overcome the forces of evil. Since Hashem has, so to speak, kiviyachol, a vested interest in the spiritual success of every one of us in our struggle to conquer evil, He will save us for His own sake. This idea that He will save us for His own sake is the end of chapter 28 in Tanya. So chapters 27 and 28 are talking about dealing with thoughts. Chapter 27 talks about the annoying thoughts coming up during our daily life. Chapter 28 speaks about the annoying thoughts coming up where we're trying to daven and learn. And chapter 28 ends, what if we're just overwhelmed? It's like a flood. Then turn to Hashem and ask him for his sake to do it. We're not even asking him for our sake, because I'm driving myself crazy. No, we're saying for his sake, because a piece of his essence is in us. Why should this piece of Hashem's essence have to suffer for my thoughts? Please, Hashem, for your sake, please free me from these thoughts. He will save us for his own sake. Again, the end of chapter 28 of Tanya. Okay, so we're proceeding onward here. If our prayer is sincere and earnest enough, Hashem will come to the rescue. The soul, we said that, I'm sorry, the next bottom paragraph. The awareness that as creations of Hashem, formed in his image, we are essentially good and existentially separate from the problems and anxieties that beset us, implies that we can avail of ourselves of his help at any time. Okay, so what is this? It's saying that we're existentially separate from the problems and anxieties that beset us. A very important idea for our mental health. We need to be able to step out of them and look at them objectively. Again, this idea. And Hashem is standing on our right side, it says in Tehillim, ready to save us from the onslaught of dark thoughts, turn the page, that attack us. In this sense, we can always consider ourselves above misery of the world, the misery that we're suffering, that we can separate from it. So it's something that we have to practice. We can practice in smaller things, but we need to practice stepping out of our problems and identifying with the divine soul and looking at them objectively. Okay, when we consciously choose to step out of a problem or appeal to Hashem for help, we are admitting that confronting it ourselves could make matters worse. Realizing we cannot deal with our problems directly prevents our ego from reasserting itself. So keeping the ego, for mental health, it's good to keep the ego at a nice, humble position where it's not like trying to maintain its irrational self-image. It's not feeling better than other people. It's not going to fall, because when it rises, it will fall. It's not a natural position for the ego. So we want to keep it in a nice, humble place. And turning to Hashem, and this is like, as I'm quoting from Effie, since I'm an idiot, please take care of everything. Yes, so that's that will keep the ego from reasserting itself. The admission of our inadequacy and a reliance on Hashem. So this is this phase 4, the subphase of Hachna'ah within Havdalah, submission within separation. At this point, we are not yet making a direct confrontation with darkness, nor are we even asking Hashem for strength to combat it. We're saying he should save us for his sake. Save us. So turning to Hashem and say, save me for your sake, is the Hachna'ah within separation. We can understand that. Turning to Hashem, it's a good thing to do. It's not like, turning to Hashem, save me, I have a piece of your essence in me, save me for your sake. Okay, now we're getting up to a really important part. Since this is the 5th one, this is my mathematics for today, and there are 9 stages altogether. This is the middle stage. Havdalah within Havdalah. This is an important one, and its subheading is self-redefinition. Self-redefinition, which is already a great idea. I'm tired of my old self-definition. It's just getting really tired. I'm ready for a new self-definition. Okay, can more people put on their cameras for a few minutes? I just like to see that some work. Just come on, just for a moment or two, put on your cameras. It's very healthy for me to see people. It gives me that sense I'm not alone. Yes, Yay! Look at those nice people. Thank you. Okay. Okay, self-redefinition. The next stage of therapy is positive redefinition. As we said previously, one of the dangers of anxiety is that it may encourage us to define ourselves in terms of our problems. Now, so I want to make sure that everybody in their new self redefinition, we're tired, we're no longer to define ourselves in terms of our problems. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then the fear that other people are defining ourselves in terms of our problems, like there's something deeper to us than our problems. Isn't that exciting news? Yes, okay. So we don't want to define ourselves in terms of our problems. We can counter this pitfall by becoming aware of our divine soul, the undefiled point of inner purity that cannot be sullied by the illusions of the animal soul's ego and the anxieties it produces. The illusions of the animal soul's ego and the anxieties it produces. So it's good to know, where do our anxieties come from? They come from the animal soul's ego. We don't, and we have another part. I love these words, undefiled point of inner purity that cannot be sullied. Isn't that, don't you want to underline that? It's very important to remember that, because someone can feel so sullied by the world and just get into some hopeless state, but we know that we have this divine soul, an unsullied point of inner purity. We have to bring it out. It's so beautiful. I love it. Just talking about it, I'm feeling much better. Okay. Despite the real or imagined gravity of our situation, there remains deep within us an untouched and unaffected point of wholeness and goodness. As soon as we remember this, we can use this point to recast our whole situation in a more positive light. Without this awareness, so again, the healing is coming from our divine soul. Without this awareness, we may conceive of our inner selves as problematic, or even tainted by some psychological disorder or complex. Now, we don't want to define ourselves by our psychological or physical complexes, right? Okay, we understand that that's not a good idea. In truth, however, we possess an identity and selfhood that is independent of our anxieties. Very good to remember. The next time we're having an anxiety attack, we possess an identity independent of our anxieties. If we can gradually identify with this inner point of health, we can rehabilitate ourselves in its image. So the more we can connect, the more of our identity we can connect with our divine soul. This is health. This is mental health. This is a foundation for mental health. We can build on this foundation. Instead of seeing ourselves as like some poor victim of some psychological trauma, I shouldn't laugh, but we know we're laughing and crying simultaneously. Because we can see ourselves as the poor victim of some psychological trauma. The animal soul certainly does, but we want to see ourselves as the piece of Hashem's unsullied purity. Okay. Now here's an interesting chapter on depression on the top of page 47. Depression, for example, often springs from a deep sense of failure in life. Okay, useful information. Having failed repeatedly, depressed people start to give up. I guess, we've seen that happen to people. Depressed people, they feel like they failed, they start to give up. Because they are unable to achieve their goals, they lose their motivation and become physically and morally weak. I thought that was insightful. That depression, someone can feel, I'm just, why even try? Why try to have any moral strength? I'm depressed. Depression leads, that's the big danger of depression, is that it can lead to moral weakness. Beware. And in extreme cases, they may even lose their will to live. Chas v'shalom. But this is, there are Of course, there is clinical depression, and Taurus and Nefesh holds that people can, in an emergency situation, can certainly be better by temporarily taking medication to help with the depression. Kadorim, as it's known in Hebrew, can have its place, but there also has to be work on on the thoughts that go into it, and changing the thoughts that cause it, to know that this is caused by feelings of failure, etc. Such frustration and disappointment are the side effects of an unchecked ego. Very interesting that depression is a side effect of an unchecked ego. Frustrated or disappointed people feel how far away they are from their would-be self-image. Here, the destructive ego-based feelings that one is nothing or worthless must be isolated from the constructive feeling that one is nothing in the presence of Hashem. Okay, so this definitely, we have to have a little bringing on. L'chaim, l'chaim. So what is this saying? It's saying that the ego-based feeling that I'm nothing is low self-esteem, but it's ego-based. It's like that, so that's the one hand. I'm nothing, it's a negative thing. Why is it? Because I'm still me. It's not about my shlichus, it's about me and my failures in life, me and my disappointments in life, me and all the bad things that have happened to me in life. So that's ego-based feelings that one is nothing or worthless, as opposed to the constructive feeling of being bittul in the presence of Hashem. So I just want, in case some people weren't here, for the difference between bittul and shiftless. I think it's very important. Bittul is like a gift from Hashem, that I feel Hashem's presence, and in Hashem's presence, my ego naturally nullifies itself. It's just, wow, cosmic, godliness. Shiftless is when I'm not having that cosmic experience. I feel my ego, but I'm lowering it. Chapter 30 of Tanya, that we should feel humble before the lowest of the low mamish, the Alter Rebbe says. For the lowest of the low mamish. It's a real to keep the ego in that. It's a very safe, because it's very dangerous when the ego gets up, since it's an unnatural place, it always will fall down. And that could be quite painful for the poor ego. So we don't want it to have to get a lot of Band-Aids and first aid. We want to keep it in a nice, healthy place of shiftless, which we're going to speak more about. Okay, and then there's a little story here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but by somebody who felt like this negative, low self-esteem, and by learning a little, getting the right of Hashem's continual recreation and all of that, he was able to get himself out of that. So look, and we can do it too. Okay, top of 48. The most effective way of contacting this inner point of origin is meditative prayer. Normally, our instinctive awareness of being rooted in a higher spiritual source is very deep within our subconscious. We can, however, bring it into our conscious mind through meditative prayer. And again, meditative prayer is remembering Hashem. That's the main, for meditative davening, or meditation, that we're in Hashem's presence. I mean, alavai, that the whole time we're davening, we should remember we're in Hashem's presence. I mean, we're doing such a nice thing standing up there rather than lying on the couch. The least we can do for the poor, for ourselves, is remember we're in Hashem's, bringing Hashem into our conscious mind. Bringing Hashem into, being conscious of Hashem, that is already hiskafia. That's already moving the ego. If I'm thinking about Hashem rather than my ego, I'm already doing hiskafia and thinking about it. So this is bringing Hashem. The more we do it, we're making Hashem conscious. We're making the divine soul conscious. We're putting the effort in, that it shouldn't just be buried someplace in our subconscious. We're making it conscious. Yes. Okay, since we are seeking here to renew ourselves in our divine origin, an abstract attempt to visualize ourselves ascending to our spiritual root will not work. It's not enough just to visualize this, for this is too superficial. Rather, the ascent must be part and parcel of our deepest heartfelt prayer to Hashem. We meditate in Hashem's presence, asking him to elevate us and draw us near to him, our ultimate source. So let's go over this slowly. Okay, so how do we renew ourselves in the fact that, in the idea that that Hashem gave us a piece of his essence, that we're in Hashem's presence? So we do this through heartfelt prayer, heartfelt meditation, that we meditate in Hashem's presence. So we daven in Hashem's presence, we meditate in Hashem's presence. We want to bring Hashem's presence into our lives, and we're asking him to draw us near to him. And this is what I mentioned earlier, and one of the things I really remember that I had the source of being with Rabbi Ginzburg when he did his few day seminar in Elul in Prague by the gravesite of the Maharal. And we were learning Netivat HaTshuva, the path of Tshuva. And the point that really stuck in my mind was the Maharal said Tshuva is saying to Hashem, I want to do Tshuva, I want to get close to you. It was like such simple words. I memorized it. I want to do Tshuva, I want to get close to you. And as we said, that doing Tshuva, doing Tshuva, we know that when we want to do Tshuva and we ask Hashem to forgive us, that prayer is answered immediately. That's the prayer that's answered immediately. So this week we should all be successful. We should be successful in feeling ourselves in Hashem's presence, in dismissing the thoughts and being aware of the thoughts that come into our minds, being aware of the ones we're able to dismiss ourselves, and being aware of the ones that we have to beseech Hashem for his help, as it says in the end of chapter 28 of Tanya, to beseech Hashem that he should help us. So I see that Avraham Trugman, Rabbi Trugman, is here for the next class, and we should give everybody 2 or 3 minutes to do some jumping jacks, get further refreshments. Thank you all for joining me. Much appreciated. It's really good to see everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you.